welcome back to Question Block, Secret Loft's live historical educational podcast. I am Wires, or at Wires of NYC on Instagram, also known as Alex, and with me is
Arielist.
How can they find you?
Ariel.ist.
On Instagram. Yeah.
Or
And
at Secret Loft in person.
Sweet. So this week we're talking about philosophy, which is a great topic for a show called Question Block, because philosophy is the science, the discipline
questions.
of asking questions.
I got the Philosopher's Award in preschool, famously.
Yeah, and I asked you what that meant.
I actually don't know.
It didn't say on the certificate. And I said it meant that you were like Socrates. Well, it probably just meant you asked why a lot, which is annoying when little kids do that. Or if you were like Socrates, it meant she like wanders around and is unkempt and smelly. And we'd like to banish her.
I smelled
We'd
amazing.
like to banish her.
I smelled amazing.
But
they did make me drink poison, so, you know.
Yeah, we give her hemlock at nap time so that she goes to sleep easier. Let me duck down and mess with the mic levels real quick. Be right back.
Okay.
Going downstairs over here?
The philosophy of folly. Okay. So, should we give a little history? A little timeline?
All right, I'm back.
Where should we start? Okay, he's back. Yay.
Great. Yeah, I think if you could maybe walk us through a timeline, and then we each did research on several different philosophers. So, like, as it comes up, we'll talk about those particular philosophers. But, like, take us back to the beginning, the ancient world.
So when was the first thought?
That's a good philosophical question.
Yeah.
It'd be great if this entire podcast we just ask questions. We're like, really though, who was John Locke? What is a John Locke?
Why?
Yeah, but we're not going to do that. We'll
Did
just,
Nietzsche have such a fabulous beard?
as with most episodes of Question Block, we're going to tell you just enough that you can be interesting at a party and sound like you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you can actually come to one of our parties.
We'll talk about that at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the early philosophy, as I understand it from my research, is very funny because it's all called the very like first, I guess, philosophers are called pre-Socratic, which is funny because they're like named after the much better philosopher who came later.
Yeah.
Socrates was in like golden age
Let's
Athens.
talk about the pre-Socratics
Yeah.
before we get into who
Okay.
Socrates was, okay? We'll build up the tension.
Well, the funny thing is, that they couldn't have called themselves pre-Socratic because they like didn't know who Socrates was.
They also couldn't call themselves philosophers of the ancient world because their world was like
it was
present.
the world. Yeah.
So I basically think of these guys as like what stuff is made of. Like one of them was like, okay, everything's made of water, and then another one was like, no, I think everything's made of fire. They just kind of
They did a lot of arguing about what stuff is made of. Yeah.
And then one of them had a shape cult.
Well, let's break down. Let's tell their names, okay?
So
what?
The water dude was Thales of Miletus.
Thales is the earliest back philosopher I found, so 7th century BC.
Yeah.
And he was kind of I guess he was very well off and was one of the, like a wealthy family, was one of the, he was like a babe, he was wealthy, and he was one of the first guys who was like, there must be rational explanations for stuff. So he famously got rich from like just studying basic cause and effect. I guess this is all recorded in tablets that they found. But he noticed that like when there were heavy rains, there would be a good olive harvest. And whereas everybody else was like, no, we get a good olive harvest from praying to the gods, right? And so he like put it to the test. So one year it rained like very heavily all summer, and he went out and bought up, I guess, like every olive press in town and like cornered the market, and then just like made a fortune because there was a good olive harvest.
Okay, so he believed everything was made of water.
Mm-hmm.
That was like his thing. He was like, it's all water, ice, everything, right?
Yeah, they did want to know where humans came from. Definitely. Oh, by the way, these are in the Ionian school. There are two pre-Socratic schools. So there's the Greeks and the Ionians. The Ionians are more like modern day Turkey or whatever. It's still off the Mediterranean.
There's also the Eastern school, and we'll talk about that in like a separate little section right after
sorry,
this.
this is the Western. We're just talking about the Western school.
But I'm going to talk about the three main Eastern dudes.
I mean right now.
Yeah.
Temporally.
Okay. So.
Okay, give me another one.
Right.
Thales was the babe.
Then Pythagoras was the triangle cult guy.
And there really was a shapes cult.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, he was like, I love triangles. And maybe he was like the first gay philosopher. Oh wait, they were all gay probably. Cuz Greek.
It was fine to be attracted to both men and women back then.
No, I just mean cuz of the triangle.
They were all pan.
Cuz the triangle is like the symbol.
Oh, I just think the Greeks were all pans. Socrates was too.
That was the joke that I made, and now it's not funny.
No, because they were all bi.
Okay. So he was really into triangles, also the harmony of the spheres. So he thought that all planets had like a magical sound, which is so cool. And then he also had a cult where you weren't allowed to eat legumes. There were like a couple other rules, but that's like the weirdest one. Yeah.
Okay.
And everyone wore triangle hats.
Could make some fart joke, I guess, about the legumes.
Yeah, well, that's exactly why he was like, that's like not proper or whatever.
Nobody farting during my philosophical dialogues.
Yeah.
Anaximander.
Oh yeah, the map dude.
He invented maps. He also, because everybody was trying to figure out where humans came from, right, and what stuff was made of. So Anaximander was like, humans are far too frail to have evolved like this. So we must have grown inside fish. Basically, the humans like evolved inside whales and then evolved and then came onto land.
That's amazing.
It's pretty great. Anaximenes believed that the earth formed from air, right? Unlike, who is it? Thales believed that stuff came from water. Thales also philosophized about magnets, because they had magnets back then in like 7th century BC. Yeah, he believed they were alive. Although that's not quite fair. They think because they didn't have as many words back then, so he might have just been like they're animated or they move, because it was the same word.
And they're
as
also
living.
made of water.
And they're made of water.
Okay.
Heraclitus is the last pre-Socratic. Well, two more pre-Socratic ones.
Heraclitus thought that everything was made of fire, right? And
Yep.
he said everything is
it's on fire.
Yeah, and also everything is in flux, which if everything is made of fire, I guess.
Well,
so.
he had the very cool quote, and this is probably one of the oldest quotes that survived, that you can never step into the same river twice.
Oh, true.
Which is like a pretty deep thought.
Yeah, especially if it's a deep river.
Yeah, but his personal biography is funny because he was from a pretty wealthy family, but was a misanthrope and like a very angry hermit. He cured himself of some disease at some point by totally submersing himself in shit. It's like that was his like how he did medicine, I guess. Weird dude.
But
and
he was like, it's made from fire, so that's okay.
Also heavy gambler. So constantly while gambling, then I guess would talk about philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I got one more. You talked about Pythagoras. Democritus.
Oh yeah, he was okay. So he was also he was also really crazy because he was like such a troll. I think he was like a huge troll.
Democritus, or they all were, weren't they? Socrates was too.
Sorry, I was thinking of Diogenes.
Oh, okay.
Go on with Democritus. I was like, I had to.
Democritus, and what's also known as probably the luckiest guess of all history, postulated atoms, that there was some individual, like indivisible particle of matter that made up like all matter and space. And the word atom, I guess, means a, which is like not, like anti, and tom in like ancient Greek meant cuttable. So atom means uncuttable, like some
Crazy.
uncuttable piece of matter. So yeah, Democritus went on to influence Galileo, John Locke, all these natural scientists, almost 3,000 years later, which is pretty cool. But they looking back at it, it's not like Democritus had some special knowledge. It probably was a lucky guess. And he was like technically wrong because there's stuff that is smaller than atoms and you can split an atom. But everybody's doing their best here. So pretty good guess. But he proposed atoms as an answer to Zeno's paradox. You want to tell us about Zeno?
Yeah. Zeno, he loved to like fuck with your mind because he would create these logical reasonings, but then they would end in absurdity. So he would be like, okay, if you want to go to the store, you have to go halfway to the store first. And then you have to go halfway to the store, and then halfway of that. So you actually never get there.
Mm-hmm.
And people were like, cool, that makes sense. But now I'm confused.
But how will I ever get to the store?
Yeah.
He gave the example. His example was Achilles racing a tortoise. Then you give the tortoise like a big head start. And he's like, Achilles is much faster, but Achilles will never catch up to the tortoise because he has to go half the distance to the tortoise, then half that distance, then half that distance. It's
so he was the guy who was like, you know, that like riddle that's, you know, your dad is like never believe anything that your mom says because it's all a lie, and then your mom goes, that's right, you should only believe your dad. He was like, that's like a
yes.
You know?
What is it? If somebody says to you, I always lie.
Ugh, I hate stuff like that. I'm just like, why? Like, why did he get famous? He had a cool name, that's why.
It's a real paradox.
Yeah, but I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable.
So Democritus answered that, the racing paradox, by being like, well, there's an atom, so there's like an invisible state of matter, so at some point you can't go half of the distance. And that's not actually the answer if you study geometric series.
The answer is like Achilles will catch up to the fucking tortoise because it's a goddamn tortoise.
Yeah, but
like,
but it's pretty cool that he like, you know,
like
he posed it that way.
You would have to let the tortoise like win.
Well, you're missing the point of the paradox.
Yeah, I don't like it. It's a waste of my time.
If you remember your high school math, I forget if it was in like algebra or calculus, you solve for like infinite geometric series, and so there's a formula that tells you the answer.
I'm undereducated in the math.
Well, the ancient Greeks didn't know it either, so don't worry about it. Yeah, so that, I think that kind of summarizes all the Ionians and Greeks prior to Socrates.
Okay.
Whereas in the movie Bill and Ted, as they say, it's under Socrates.
Yeah. Socrates. So he's like the mouse in or the rat in Willard. The good one.
I didn't see this. This is a movie?
It's also a book. Yeah.
All right, that's not, I don't think, a great introduction to Socrates, the founder of Western philosophy, as he's known, because of his emphasis on rationalism. Socrates himself did not write anything down, so everything that we have from Socrates was written by two of his students, Plato and Xenophon. And Xenophon, while like well-educated and pretty wealthy, supposedly didn't really get Socrates. So whereas Plato supposedly very much did, and then Plato later had some of his own writings. So Plato generally regarded as like the guy who Socrates is like best student who really got him, who like brought him to the world or preserved him for antiquity.
How do we
know
that he even existed, Socrates?
So they found like sparse facts about his biography, but they like conflict. So there's like a active research going on between like with historians or archaeologists and people interpreting texts and like modern day philosophers about, they're pretty certain Socrates was a real person and that Plato was a real person. Apparently the character of Socrates changes throughout the history of Plato's writings.
No, I know, but how do we know that Socrates is real though?
Just because Plato wrote about him.
Maybe he was made up.
I think there's a recording that he like.
There's a recording.
Had a family. The's like a stone tablet somewhere that's like his family.
There's a tape recorder. He's like, I'm a real person.
Wait, there's all these statues of him. I'll show you.
I mean, he could have been. I don't know.
They didn't make the statues back when he was alive.
But he didn't write anything, right? Because he got like a bad review one time, and he was like, never again. He was like so embarrassed.
No, it all goes to his like basic, I guess, his philosophy. But he was from a pretty like upper middle class family of like stonemasons or something. But he chose to live like he didn't care about. He was like I guess anti-Epicurean. He didn't really care about like he was very moderate in food and drink.
Actually,
he didn't sleep with his male students, which a lot of the other philosophers did, because he like wanted to educate them. And he like smelled very bad. He was famously ugly.
That's probably why he didn't sleep with any of his male students.
He couldn't.
He's like, no, I'm educating. So can I just point out like a two little, I don't know, things, misconceptions that you just brought up?
What?
So one, Epicurus was actually extremely modest, and he was more of a communist. I don't know how hedonism really became associated with him, because he actually was like very, very modest. He was like, I've married philosophy. I don't have orgies.
But didn't the Epicureans believe in like maximizing pleasure?
No. Well, no, kind of, but not in a hedonist, not in a excessive way.
Oh.
Their three like tenets were: you should have friends more than lovers. So they lived on a commune. You should also great wealth and like extravagance actually makes you miserable. So you should live a life of just like moderation, which is it's so weird. Everyone's like, oh yeah, like he was like hedonistic and crazy, but he really wasn't. He had actually a lot of like stomach problems and stuff, and he couldn't really enjoy food that much because his stomach hurt.
A lot of Greek yogurt.
Maybe he should have. And the other thing is that when the whole like sleeping with the younger students, that was like a trade. Like they were trading. The origins of the word trade. They were trading for knowledge. Like it was
Yeah, but Socrates wouldn't do it, supposedly.
Yeah, because he smelled bad. No one. People were like, I don't want. Yeah.
But he, as part of his whole, whether it's authentic or not, his like public persona was very much not that like I'm a very wise like elder who's thought a lot about stuff. Socrates professed like total ignorance. So he lived in a pretty poor circumstances. Was mostly just supported by like I guess money instead of sex from his students.
Yeah.
Yeah, his teachings are related to us through Plato's writings of Socrates' dialogues.
Right.
So everything Plato sort of relates from Socrates is in the form of Socrates talking with someone else. So the concept of the Socratic method, which is basically asking questions to get from a standpoint of ignorance, asking questions to get to the truth of a thing.
Ooh, I have a really good example.
Let's do it.
So from a movie.
Okay.
You know, in Pulp Fiction, when they're talking about like the reason why like they're like it's Marcella, it's the two like thugs, right? They're talking. Bruce Willis, Jules and Samuel L. Jackson. Yeah. They're talking about why their coworker was like punched out, and it's because he gave Marcellus Wallace's wife a foot massage. Yes. And one of them's like, what's so bad about a foot massage? Like, and the other one's like, he starts out really broad, and he's like, and then he narrows it down to like, would you ever give like another guy a foot massage? So he kind of like gets them to realize. That's
a good example.
Yeah.
Although the way Socrates often did it, or as revealed in the dialogues, they're often structured as, like a real famous set of them is like dialogues on virtues. So they talk about like, is being honest always a virtuous trait? And he's having a dialogue with some citizen of Athens, and they got real sick of his shit by the end of it. He lived to like 71, but the Athenian goes like, yeah, of course. And he's like, are there cases where it's like not a good thing to lie, or where it could be good to lie to somebody? And they're like, And Socrates, and they're like, I don't know, like, come on, Socrates, like, you know this. And he's like, no, I have no idea. I'm asking you. And they're like, no, you should never lie. And he's like, well, what about if the lie could like prevent harm to somebody? And they're like, no, you should probably still tell the truth. But like, and he'll kind of construct an example where it's like, so the example he gives is if your friend has like stored weapons at your house, like a spear, and somebody wrongs them, and your friend is all pissed off and comes to you and is like, you got my spear? And you're obviously you should be like, no, dude, I haven't seen it. I'm sorry. Like, yeah. So that's like the noble lie, for example, that Plato wrote about.
Yeah. Yeah, Socrates did not like democracy, and that's why he was killed.
Well, the climate, and he was actually, his crime was disrespecting the gods.
Oh, well, he didn't like democracy, right? But it's ironic because a democracy voted to kill him, and normally they would let you escape. They were like, yeah, you're sentenced to death in 2 days, wink, wink, and like you could escape. But he was like, no, I will accept my duty and I will drink the hemlock.
So he famously had a very deep respect for the law. In the context of this happening is that Sparta basically took over Athens. Like,
oh, the 300 happened? Yeah,
that was them defending against the Persians. But it was called the 30. These 30 Spartans got put in charge of Athens. And then when the Spartans, their army left, the Athenians revolted and like were ready to kill the 30. And at some point like did. And like, so it was a very tense political climate. And at some point the 30 asked Socrates to go help arrest somebody. And he was like, no, they haven't been judged under Athenian law. And he refused to help, which was probably part of the context.
Yeah.
So he like had a very, despite his like, showing that sometimes it's noble to lie or to like not do the actual virtuous thing, he supposedly had a very deep respect for the law.
Okay. So he died. He drank some hemlock and he died. And it's in a painting.
Yeah.
And it's a great painting.
That is a fantastic classical painting.
Yes. Okay.
Great
we have
use of
so many
perspective.
Philosophers.
All right. One other thing I'll leave you with for Socrates, because this is, founder of Western philosophy, is
I don't really care for him.
Socratic irony, which is what Socrates would do.
Which is how he died. It is.
It's meant different from what you think. It's not an ironic thing. It's a method of argument where you pretend to know less than the person you're arguing with, than your opponent, so that they'll kind of like trap themselves.
Oh,
so
I do that all the time.
They'll say more and more ridiculous things, and you're like, oh, really? Oh, is that how it works?
I do that
oh, cool.
all
like,
the time.
And then he would eventually, the dialogues, a lot of them are structured like this, and at some point he's like, wait, but doesn't that totally contradict this other concept? Yeah. So I think that's how that whole like story with your friend looking for weapons in your house, he constructed it that way. Okay. He first had somebody say, no, you should never lie. And then he was like, wouldn't the virtuous thing be to lie in this situation? They're like, yes. And he's like, well, how do those mesh? And then at the end of the dialogue, everyone throws their hands up and the Curb Your Enthusiasm music plays, because they kind of, his point over and over again was the things you assume you actually don't know anything about.
Okay, so Plato and the Cave.
Also Socratic dialogue, by the way.
Yeah.
Written by Plato, but
I love Plato.
From Socrates.
Plato he had all these dialogues because he was like afraid of getting persecuted. So he was like, I'll just make a story about it. And that way people can just read it as like a nice story, whatever.
Yes, there's a theory that because the way Socrates is written in Plato's writings changes like over time, like from like story to story, that at first Plato was like, when he was younger, was authentically like recording what Socrates was saying. And by the end, because Plato lived like several more decades past when Socrates died, towards the end, it's like Plato just inserting himself into the story and just having the character of Socrates say what he believes.
So, all right. So we're in a cave, right?
Mm-hmm. This is in the dialogue,
The Cave.
The Republic. Oh, no, you're right. It's called the Allegory of the Cave, actually. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're in a cave, right? And we've never been outside of the cave. Sounds kind of topical.
Oh, it's sort of a pandemic thing.
Yeah,
maybe your
it's
phone.
a little pandemic.
Your phone is the allegory. Of the cave.
Exactly. Okay, right? So you haven't seen, you can only see like shadows and stuff from the outside world.
If there are men, yes, he gives the example of men chained in a cave. There's a fire behind them, keeping them warm, and things passing in front of the cave basically cast shadows on the wall of the cave that they see. And so their entire reality is the shadows, but there's like obviously much more to reality than what they can see.
Yeah.
And so that allegory is that he believed what we experience with our senses is not true, like pure, timeless reality. It's just how we perceive reality.
Right. It's basically Instagram.
And so that's where the concept of a Platonic ideal. So he believed there's like 3 higher forms of reality, which are natural sciences,
420.
Math.
Oh, okay.
/ geometry, and the theory of forms or Platonic ideals.
Okay.
So his an example would be if you look at me making this little, you're like, oh, that's a triangle, right? And you can look at you doing the same thing, and you're like, oh, that's a triangle. And it's like, what we've just done are like actually totally different shapes, but there's this concept in your brain of a triangle, of like a perfect thing. But never in nature will you see an actual perfect, geometrically perfect triangle. So like, where does
You're
that
going to
come
be
from?
disappointed for your entire life until you die. Yeah. Also, Platonic, Platonic relationships, I think, is really cool because, his thing was like that you'll find someone who's your soulmate, kind of like your other half. Like he believed that we were born as whole and then like cut in half, and then our other half went somewhere in the world. And
that's Plato?
Yeah.
Oh.
And then
which shows up again in Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah.
On the origin of love.
Yeah. And then you find that other half, right? And it's not love. It's not love. It's just like you feel complete. It's kind of like Jung took the idea of the aminos, which is like your soulmate best friend. It's like you're not. It's your platonic friend. Platonic love, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the concept came from the fact that Plato didn't sleep with his male students, and they were like friends, so they called that Platonic. But I think you're probably right.
He did. He definitely did. He has the Platonic, Platonicness. This whole concept is in one of his dialogues that is between a young guy and like the older hot, sexy teacher that is fucking him for knowledge.
Awesome.
He's like, I will trade you one penis for all the knowledge in your brain. I will trade you brain for brain.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
All right, cool.
So, yeah. And then we have Aristotle, who would be me, like Ariel Aristotle, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because Aristotle was like, all these other dudes, they're kind of like a little much. So I'm just gonna find a nice middle ground. So he was all about the golden mean, which is like, it's like Goldilocks. You can remember it like Goldilocks, you know?
Aristotle very much embraced the like natural sciences.
He had a zoo too, and he was like all into categorizing creatures.
Yeah, taxonomies.
I love his categorizations are like fairies, dolphins. They're very like Lisa Frank. He's like tigers, lions.
They're just cool animals.
Grasses. Yeah. Rainbows. He also was the teacher of Alexander the Great.
Yes, I did read that.
Yeah. So I think he's really cool. And he also really put syllogism to, like, he like really, showcased that, which would be like All men are mortal. Plato is a man, therefore Plato is mortal.
Oh, logic. That's basically like fundamentally what you call like a. You're right. That was Aristotle.
Yeah,
Right.
that
I
was.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
So that all, yeah, like actual. Oh, there's a name for the actual like science of it. Or
It's
whatever.
called
What is it?
syllogism.
Syllogism?
Yeah. That is what it is called. And yeah, he was cool. Aristotle, I like him. I feel like he was the best of them. He was the best. He also was like wealthy. He was a wealthy dude, but he was like his dad I think tutored a bunch of wealthy people and that gave him the in. Yeah. I'll also mention the epic troll that I was going to talk about before.
Oh, it's called propositional logic.
Oh, okay. I like
That's what I was
syllogism better.
thinking.
Anyway, so Diogenes, I just think this is really funny. Diogenes, he was like the epicest of the trolls of that time because he would carry a lamp around and he would say that he was looking for an honest man, and he would also bring
Really?
yeah, he would be like,
That's so dramatic.
I know. I just like, oh my gosh, respect. And then he also would bring food to lectures to like distract people. I honestly have no idea what his philosophy was. I think he was just a troll. And then he also had this great like shade the library is open moment with Alexander the Great, where they just like epically threw shade at each other, and it's like documented somewhere. But yeah, I just think he's funny. Anyway, I guess we should talk about Eastern philosophy before we get too far in the future.
Yeah, because it's going on
because it happened before this, actually.
Well, and like now the Dark Ages happened too. So
yeah,
there's like a bunch of just kind of garbage, and then people trying
before
to prove
we get
that God
to the Dark
exists.
Ages, we're gonna rewind a little bit.
So let's do the East.
Yeah. So Eastern philosophy actually happened.
Wait, can we make up some syllogisms because they're fun?
Sure.
Do you want?
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I'm gonna say yeah, we could say like all aerialists are beautiful. Ariel is an aerialist.
Therefore beautiful. Oh,
Yeah,
thank
see?
you.
It's a good syllogism.
Or we could say all wires are doctors.
I'm not sure I agree with
Alex
that.
Is
that
Alex
first
is a
proposition.
wire, therefore Alex is a Dr. Wires.
Nice, pretty good.
Yes.
And then the cool thing is that Aristotle wrote all these down, and there's just like there are like 29 of them or something, and like that's all syllogisms.
There's all of them that exist. Okay.
That's all of them that exist.
We'll look those up.
You can't lose in arguing if you know those. You're good.
Sweet. That's also one of them, right?
But they're
syllogisms always win.
yeah. There's a form of there's like algebra around it, so you can then convert one syllogism to another through some rules.
No
which
math.
Is pretty neat.
No math. We're gonna do a math episode.
Okay, let's
Math
head.
makes it hard.
Let's head a little bit to the east.
And back in time just a little bit. Okay.
Yeah.
Because this all happened. This is kind of pre-Socratic. Anyway. So there's like the three main. Do you know the three main dudes?
Oh, because I guess.
Do you know the three main Eastern dudes?
Throughout the entire. I mean, there's
no, the
Buddha,
three main ones that people know. Right. So there's Buddha.
Confucius.
Yes, and Lotso.
Okay.
Right. So I'm just super brief. Confucius, he was like the family man, right? And he thought he was like super into like order and like politeness and like sometimes it's all like pre-Socratic. It's all floating in this pool before the Dark Ages.
Well, no, but pre-Socratic means before 400 BC or whatever. That's like pre-Athens, basically. So I want to know. Was he working for a dynasty, like a Chinese dynasty, or was he just out there?
He was the 6th century. Okay. BC. Oh my gosh! Why do you ask me dates? It gets me confused. I was doing good.
You have a timeline.
I do. I don't. Okay, I'm just gonna talk about it. If you want to tell people dates, you can. I really don't care.
All right, you keep going. I'm gonna look it up.
Okay, because this is all out of order anyway. So Confucius, he was super family man. He was super into like, yeah, relationships and like respect. He was like the respectful family man, and he was like pretty rigid and like pretty, yeah, he was pretty like strict about stuff. Luzzo was, you can remember him as lazy because he was the one who was just like, whatever. He was just like, whatever happens. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
He was just a
like,
lazy philosopher?
Yeah. Well, that's how I always remember it, because his name starts, it starts with an L, you know? And he was kind of like a hippie. He was just like, the journey's the destination. It's all good. Right. And then.
So you're right. If I can. So timing. Confucius about 100 years before Socrates.
Yes. Okay, great.
Okay.
And then.
Lao Tzu
was 6th century.
Was even before Confucius.
Yeah. And Siddhartha is 480 BCE.
Yeah.
Or no, sorry, the death of Siddhartha. So he was like way before.
Oh,
that.
these guys. So yeah, they all predate.
As I said. Okay. As I said what I said.
What was going on in ancient India around that time?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
I want to set the scene, like a day in the life of the
with
Buddha.
Siddhartha?
Yeah.
Oh, he was a rich bitch. He was bougie. He was like, and he had like long nails and shit.
So they had dynasties and empires and royalties.
Yeah, he was bougie.
royalty.
He was bougie AF, and his parents were like, okay, being smart is disgusting, and like if he finds out about smartness, then it will be gross and bad. So we're never gonna let him leave the castle. And they pulled some crazy like fairy tale shit where they were like, everything must be hidden, all the windows. Like they were like, we must hide everything in the garden so he doesn't know about the real world. Like they really tried to conceal, but then
they really tried to mind.
But then there was one day where like one of the servants was like, hey, I'm gonna run some errands. Do you want to come with? And Buddha was like, or Siddhartha, he wasn't Buddha then. He was like, sure. And they did not account for that. So he was like in the Rolls Royce. They were like driving through the forest, and he saw an ugly person, and he was like, ew, what is that? And the servant was like, oh yeah, it's just like some people are ugly, like, and poor. And Buddha like threw up. Or not Buddha, sorry, Siddhartha
faints.
Siddhartha.
Yeah.
And then they're like driving a little bit further, and they see like a sick person, and and Siddhartha's like, oh my God, gross! Like that person really should be wearing a mask. And the servant was like, yeah.
Also the ugly person.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. And the servant was like, well, yeah, some people do get sick. And then they saw a dead person later, which is like, this is like the worst route like ever that they were taking. Like, I don't know. Yeah. And Siddhartha was like, oh my God, wake up. And
I've driven around the highways of America. Route 10, you go through the south, it's constant dead bodies and ugly people throughout that
and anti-vaxxers.
And now sick people. Yeah. So you go down 95 into Florida, pretty much the same trip. Right.
Yeah, and the servant was like, yeah, some people, things and people die. And Siddhartha was like, oh my God. This is wild.
And
he was like,
put this on TikTok.
He was like crying and stuff like that, and he found this group of really like supermodels from the 90s, like super like gaunt, and they were like, the reason, like the way to prevent this is just to deny yourself all the pleasures, and you will be beautiful and you will never die. And so like he starved a lot with them, and he also got into S&M. He would like whip himself and stuff like that. And he really didn't feel very good.
He would whip.
Yeah.
Whip himself.
He didn't feel very good. And then
he didn't feel very good about it.
He just, he was all mixed up inside. And then he sat under this tree, like I think a Bodhi seed like fell in his mouth, and he was like, oh my God, I'm so hungry. And he was like, I'm gonna sit under this tree until I can figure shit out. And I think he sat there for like, I want to say 40 days. I know that's like the Jesus time, but like it was a long time.
I think it might be.
Yeah,
Or
they all
similar.
do 40 days. So
or was it 40 years?
No, it was definitely because he's human. Like,
Okay.
yeah, he's human. This is not a religion. That's the other thing. Buddhism is a philosophy before a religion. Some people practice it as their religion, but this is a man. This is a true story. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing divine about this. Yeah, and he then like saw some ants, and he saw like one of the ants having a bad day, and then like the other ants, they were like helping it.
Oh, okay.
They were helping it like carry stuff, and he was like, oh, okay, so like the cause of suffering is just like bad expectations, and what's going to make you feel better about that is lowering your expectations, but then also like helping other people. And he came up with like 8 other reasons. So he came up with the 8-fold path to enlightenment. And then he followed the 8-fold path and he became enlightened. And then he became Buddha, which means the one who has awakened. So then he became woke AF and not bougie anymore.
When does the reincarnation come in? Right? Because you keep getting reincarnated till you reach enlightenment, right?
That is the religious part of it. So this is people who choose to practice it as a religion.
Oh, they just added that, or did Buddha like slide that? He's like, but if you want to worship.
Okay, so like this philosophy did spread, but then there were also like a pilgrimage of people that were looking for like other religions, and their like truck collided with like the philosophy truck, and then you got like, oops, all Buddhism is a religion now.
Really?
Yes.
No
yes.
way.
And also because like sometimes you'll see a statue of a Buddha that is like fat and like has droopy earlobes and has like a belly, right?
Yeah.
Not the same person as Siddhartha. Siddhartha is a skinny bitch. Okay. He's always been a skinny bitch for his whole life.
Is that
because Buddha?
Supposedly it's the enlightened Buddha. Yeah, with the fat dude.
Buddha
his belly.
means the one who has awoken, right?
Yeah.
So fat Buddha is just another woke ass fat dude who likes to laugh.
Okay.
Buddha is just means you woke AF.
Yeah.
So like I could basically be Buddha too.
Oh, anyone could be Buddha.
If you woke.
Eventually.
You don't go to sleep. You're Buddha sometimes late at night.
Because I'm very awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, most insomniacs are Buddha in their own way.
All right, so let's get back in the time machine, and now we're gonna go to the Dark Ages.
We're getting back to the West, right? That was all of Eastern philosophy. Yep. Basically.
Okay. Now we back again to the West.
Okay.
To the Dark Age. Off to the Dark Ages we go, or the medieval period.
Yeah.
Isn't it cool? It has the word evil in it.
It's eval, like evaluation. Tell me about some medieval philosophers.
Okay, so the medieval period is all about people being like, okay, so we know that there's Jesus, but like,
yeah, very heavily inspired by like the church at this point.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just relating to proofs of God. Oh,
well, but
shout out on Facebook. Someone's reading Descartes and Plato for their philosophy class in school. Feel free to cite us in your term paper.
Yeah.
Or don't.
Or give us a 5-star review on our podcast.
That's great. Well, I hope our Plato is accurate. We'll cover a little bit of Descartes. I also have read a little Descartes. But
Descartes. I'm just thinking of the DJ Descartes and Wigwam, right?
Yeah, that DJ is named after
Descartes.
Our boy Rene.
Yeah. Okay. So there's two main guys here.
Okay. I've got one that I want to talk about.
Okay.
Who do you got?
I have Augustine and Aquinas.
Yeah, those are two good, like, church philosophers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's hear about it.
Yes. So, let's see. Augustine is the one who came up with original sin, I believe.
We also should say throughout this time, and we talked about this during the cult episode, they would routinely find like ancient Greek like manuscripts or like writings of Aristotle or whatever. And Aristotle was held up as like kind of was the dude. He was like the greatest intellectual who had ever lived.
Yes.
So if they ever found
Thank
ancient
you.
writings, they like there was a steady trade of people just moving texts and documents from like Greek ruins or excavations or various libraries that they pillaged during the Crusades, whatever, back into and then like spreading it into Europe. And they were like super obsessed with like the Greeks, and they believed that that had maybe been like the pinnacle of human knowledge because it was the Dark Ages and most stuff sucked right then. So they like had a lot of like, I guess FOMO that they like missed out on the Greeks,
Yeah.
like you know Zoomers now, and they like missed out on the 80s and 90s.
I thought it was Plato though that they were like on Plato's dick.
Both Plato and Aristotle, but a lot of like all of Western medicine, I know, different episode, was based off like Aristotle for like a
Yes.
super long time.
But I think a lot of these people were super into Plato.
But yeah, tell us about Aquinas. Or no, St. Augustine.
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine, where's he from?
Hippo.
Yeah, St. Augustine at Hippo.
Hippo.
That'd
yeah.
be a cool town to be from.
So he was like, why are people like bad when God is so good? Like, what is up with that? And then he was like, you know what? It's because of Adam. So he was like, it's not your fault that you're a piece of shit. It's because Adam ate some fruit, and then we all have some of Adam in us. So you don't have to feel bad if like you make a bad choice or anything. Don't blame God for it because it's not God's fault. It's the original man's fault. So yeah, he came up with the idea of original sin. That was his vibe. And then Thomas Aquinas. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Yeah, it's Augustine he has a lot of diary entries where he's like getting boners and stuff like that, and he doesn't understand why. Yeah, he's like boners are bad, but I'm still getting them, but I'm good. And then he's like, oh, it's because Adam got boners. Okay.
This, by the way, is like 400, 420, AD is when this was happening. 420 AD, and Hippo, by the way, is a region of Africa. And it was part of like Roman Africa at that point. So he was a Roman, but he's also an African.
Yeah, he has like some pimp style here. He has like some really pimp style. I like it.
Well, yeah, right, because by 420 AD, the Romans had become
they were all juggalos.
Well, they were all Christians by that point, right? So it's like they got cool Catholic stuff going on.
Yeah. So Aquinas. Oh man, Aquinas was like, I just think of him as like, so he was like so nervous. He was such a nervous Nancy. So nervous. Because he was just like, oh, there's been smart men, but they didn't believe in Jesus. They believed in Zeus, but they're still great. So like, how could that be? And also like, I really want proof that angels exist. And like, you know, he just seemed to be kind of hanging on to or grasping at threads. But he did come up with a lot of proofs. He applied logic to theosophy.
Yeah,
you
theosophy.
know?
Yeah, if you were like smart and aware and reading a bunch of like classic Greek texts and stuff during that time, you'd be like, yeah, the greatest thinkers of all time
are burning in hell.
Yeah, they're not Christian. So like, what
dun.
did they miss? Like, why couldn't they realize that there was a Christian God? Like, what was going on?
Yeah.
So
he also, okay, side note, if anyone's like a Drag Race stan, he definitely he looks like Lawrence Chaney.
If you're a Drag Race UK fan, yes, he looks like Lawrence Chaney from Drag
like
Race
hardcore.
UK season 1.
Yeah.
Just because he has a fat chin, basically.
And like little like squinty eyes. Yeah. Because he's
clean
skeptical.
shaven.
Yeah.
It was tough to be clean shaven back then. They didn't have electric razors. You had to pretty much daily be shaving.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, he came up with some proofs for God.
Yeah. Because he was like, okay, so things always had to have moved. So there had to have been a prime mover. And he like goes way back. He's like, well, dinosaurs moved this, and then
Yeah, he's like everything that
saber-toothed tigers moved this, and they moved me, and then I moved the pen to write this. And
he had an early concept of like conservation of momentum.
Yeah.
Right? That, and this is like pre-Newton, but like the idea that like for something to move, something has to act on it. Right? And so that is, I guess, basic logic then, which later became Newtonian physics, but that idea was there, and he's like, well, what was the first thing that was moving?
Yeah, and he's like, God. Mic drop. It was God.
Yeah, and I guess they didn't have really the concept of like potential energy or phase changes or any of that
I don't
useful
think so.
stuff that physics has
But
come up with to explain how stuff moves.
He was in Aristotle. He was an Aristotle bro, and he was like, well, Aristotle says that the universe has always existed. The Bible says that the universe has not always existed. And then he's like, but what if the world did have a beginning, but God could have created it in such a way that it existed eternally? Mind blown.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, that's what I mean by, I feel like he was really like graspy.
Yeah, these all seem tenuous looking back at them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really. Yeah.
And then he has this whole thing about like angels, like, he's like, but angels can talk to you. Like, yeah. He's cute. He's a cutie pie. We appreciate him for bringing the world of brain and God together.
Yeah,
to form God brain.
Right.
Yeah. I think they really drill him in like church school.
Yeah. So he's an Italian, by the way. So he's a bit later. He's like the 1200s, right? So it's like you're getting closer to the Renaissance at that point. Before him, there was another famous Italian who I think I mostly like because of his name. So Boethius, or Boethius. Boethius. He's like this Italian theologian philosopher who was back in like 500 AD. So he worked for the church, as all the philosophers did at the time. He did a lot of translating Aristotle into Italian so that Europeans could read it, or maybe like from the ancient Greek into Latin, I suppose. But then he also he came up with the concept. It's funny because it's not very Christian, but the concept of like fate, and he drew like fate, or like the fates, as like a wheel. So he would call it. So when the game show Wheel of Fortune,
gag. He was like, "Where's my Vanna White, bitch?"
Is like, it does in a very indirect route come from the like Italian philosopher Boethius, because he called it the Wheel of Fortuna. And so if you ever read the book A Confederacy of Dunces, the main character,
he's like,
Ignatius,
the wheel has spun me dirty.
Yeah,
it's done me dirty.
He's a medievalist, and he closely follows the writings of Boethius. And he's like, yeah, and he'll be like, "Oh, cruel Fortuna, you've swung me low this time."
Oh.
So, Wheel of Fortune, the game show where you guess letters on a board with Pat Sajak and Vanna White, based on Boethius.
Oh, yeah. And
You're
then
welcome.
Thank you. Before we go on to the Renaissance, we can talk about Rumi. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about Rumi.
Yeah, just because like it's so Instagrammable. Like, you know, when people people love
the quotes of Rumi.
Yeah, they're like, everything is part of an endless cycle of birth and death, and it's like a picture of a rock or something, and then it's like Rumi, thanks, right? So yeah, Rumi was an Islamic mystic, and also whirling dervishes come from Rumi's philosophy and his I just think it's like, yeah, it's awesome mysticism. Like whirling dervishes are just people who dance, they spin, and they have like these crazy skirts that like spin in a circle, and then the dance represents a journey from like the ignorant man to like enlightened man, and you like spin yourself into that knowledge.
The whirling dervishes.
Yeah, it's like super mystic and cool. Yeah, just throwing that out there. There was some cool stuff, but then Islam got like very conservative and stuff went bad there. So yeah.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about. He's not so much a philosopher. Maimonides is a Jewish. He's like your first Jewish philosopher, but more known as like a theologian and Torah scholar. But he'll come up later because he influenced Spinoza.
Sweet. Okay, so the Renaissance it starts off with a bang with Machiavelli.
Oh yeah. Oh, how exciting.
He's like the first one of the Renaissance. Yes, we love him.
So this is it's key to, I think, now that we get into our Renaissance philosophers, it is very important to know the context of the time.
Yeah, well, he was like, I don't want shit to go down like it did in Islam, actually.
Or even just at the time was influenced by the fact that like, right, there were like the church had become very corrupt by that time. So like lots of people were sort of losing faith, but that was the only thing you had. There was the whole doctrine of like original sin. And so you had to go to church, but church wasn't like inspiring. There was no pastor who would get up to like read the Bible and give you a fun lesson. You just had to go to take the sacrament so that if you died over the next week,
which you probably would have,
you probably would, you would go to heaven. So church formed this very basic function of just giving you the sacrament. Most of the local pastors couldn't read Latin. All the Bibles and like biblical texts were in Latin too, and the church had ordained that they could only be in Latin. Most people couldn't even read them. A lot of the local, like when you went to your local church, often like the like, you know, bishop couldn't read Latin either, and they would just make it up.
Sounds like Latin America right stuff. Now.
Oh, it's like a Trump speech. Yeah. And people were constantly dying. So yeah, the plague kept sweeping through Europe like several different times. The Crusades happened, where they were like went on this holy war to retake Jerusalem.
The Seventh Seal, great movie, you should watch.
The Crusades went terribly. Just tons and tons of people died.
Because they're carrying these big ass crosses. You get crushed by a cross.
Most notably, the Children's Crusade, where they just brought like several thousand children to Jerusalem who were then like easily defeated and enslaved. So yeah, stuff was constantly going really badly.
And Machiavelli was like, I am going to straighten all this shit out.
Yeah, a lot of people lost faith, or if they kept their faith, they were like, okay, I believe in God, but why is everything so terrible constantly? So yeah, Machiavelli he didn't step in to answer exactly why life was miserable, but he stepped in with a very practical guide, and he was like,
we clearly cannot be ruled by the church anymore. So what is going to make what a great ruler will make?
So he's like, yeah, let me write a manual for a prince or some local ruler to read so they can at least govern effectively, and at least life for like their people won't suck.
Yeah.
So he was, I guess you could consider him one of the first, political philosophers.
Yeah. Yes.
So he wrote The Prince is probably his most famous work. And in it, he examines various aspects of power, and a kind of key point that he keeps coming back to is what is moral for a normal person, or like what's imperative for a normal person does not apply to a ruler. A ruler has to be much more ruthless, and if your ruler is more ruthless, overall that's actually beneficial, and that will create the greatest happiness because they'll protect their people. So he has a concept of sort of like a person can behave as a reasoning, thinking person, as a human, or as a beast, he calls it, as like an animal with like ferocity. And he makes a point. He's like,
the fox or the lion?
There you go. Yeah, the fox and the lion, right? So the fox is wily and can escape, whereas but is not feared by the dogs, whereas the lion is feared, but a lion is easily caught in a trap.
True that.
So he says, what should a ruler be? And his answer is like probably more often a lion. It's better. And the famous line from The Office from Michael Scott, is it better to be feared or loved?
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And if you remember Michael Scott's answer, he says, "I want people to love me so much that they fear how much they love me."
So there's like a theory that he didn't really feel this way that much, that he just wanted to like impress the Medici family, because the Medicis were like basically responsible for the entire Renaissance. They were so cool and so powerful, and so he dedicated the prince to Giulio Medici, but then Giulio died, so he like changed it to like Lorenzo, who's he was like, "Oops, I mean it's to you," and it's because like his other works were like getting him in trouble and getting him like imprisoned and stuff. So he was like, "Okay, I need to like get on the Medici's like good side." So he's like, "Yo, I wrote you this book, The Little Prince. Here you go."
Little Prince, yeah.
El Principito.
So
Yeah.
he, but yeah, they're I mean, even today, like very relevant, I guess, for thinking about the norms of behavior and kind of making that point that there is no universal in like how you should behave in a situation, depends on context. And then he was banished. Yeah, as you were saying, he was at some point was banished from Florence, and so had to go live. Not badly, like in his like the lands owned by his family somewhere on the outskirts of Florence, like up in the hills. But he has I'm not going to quote exactly. He has a really great passage that he wrote about in the evenings he would put on his royal robes. He would like dress up and then go to his personal library, which was still like pretty badass to have a personal library then, and consult with like, you know, the wisest men of all the ages.
Yeah.
And just the importance of the written word and how transformative it is to be able to open a book and read thoughts from, you know, brilliant people who are long since dead. So big fan of reading and writing.
So he also wrote a history of Florence. Like he got back in with the Medicis. Like he got on their good side, but they were like, you're not going to get like public. Like, they're like, you can write a little history book, but like, chill. Like you're still on house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But a lot of people use the prince to like, they're like, oh. Like
yeah, probably the most
like,
misunderstood philosophical work.
Maybe Hitler used the prince.
Yeah, or people see it as like, oh, it's good to be conniving, and you're like,
Yeah.
no, just in the specific case of like if you're,
Yeah, might makes right. That was like his vibe in that book, but we don't know. Maybe he was just a big softie.
But also not even. He was it was much more subtle and complex than that. It gets simplified, I think, that way. But he kind of consistently makes the point and gives examples even, you know, and he's like, it's dishonest to spy on another like country and to like, you know, to hide intelligence from them and to lie to them about the strength of your armies, for example. But like, it'd be very stupid to not do that and to not have spies. So like, that's a dishonest thing.
To not have spies.
It's a dishonest thing you need to do to defend your own country, you know?
Okay, so next, shall we talk about...
So Machiavelli kind of, kicks off, because it was the same time as the Medici, kicks off the Enlightenment and the Renaissance in the 1400s.
Shall we talk about Descartes?
Yeah. We'll go to Descartes next.
Descartes. He's oh my gosh, he's who I am right now. I think therefore I am. For the listeners, I'm dressed like Billie Eilish.
Mm-hmm.
In the music video, I think therefore I am.
Yeah, so is it cogito ergo sum, cogito ergo sum?
I just thinking of like penis jokes while you say that, but yeah.
So yeah, Descartes very concerned with like, also founder of key branches of mathematics and geometry, and you know, the Cartesian coordinate system and Cartesian plane, basically all of graphs or graph theory kind of traces back to Descartes. But also he was an Augustinian as well, but he also wanted, like, very concerned with metaphysics and epistemology, the study of knowledge. So how do you know things, right?
Yeah.
And with the senses, and he believed that like senses and thinking, I mean, he did some Augustinian, I guess, type stuff where like,
well, because he used the syllogism, right? So he was like
using logical proofs
Yeah, he's like
to again like kind of prove the existence of God.
Not the existence of God. This is Aristotle did the syllogism,
Yeah.
which was like, therefore, logical thinking, right? Therefore, this is that. This is this, and that is this, and therefore this is that. Like that, So.
Wow.
Yeah, he the only thing that he's actually able to prove is whether he was thinking or not. So he was like, do I have a body? Do I have a,
Oh, you're right.
Is there an outside world? Like, therefore, if I have a body and there's an outside world, whatever's going on in my brain is thinking. And he also was like, who is I? Who am I? What is I?
So yeah, so you picked this up from Aristotle. Essentialism, it's called. So the belief that essence
Moisture is the essence of wetness.
Yeah, essence precedes existence is the idea. So that and going back to even Plato's sort of theory of forms, that there are like in describing the properties of things. So he gave an example of a ball of wax that has, a shape, texture, size, color, and smell. But as you move it closer to a fire, all of those things change, but it's still wax, and you still recognize it as wax. And that's because it still has like a waxy feeling, extension, changeability, and movability, he calls it. But yeah, there are like, I don't know, ways of like thinking about the thing that are essential to its being. So it's essentialism.
Ian is asking me if I have two wigs, and it's actually one wig and my hair. Yeah.
But yeah.
I wig, therefore I am.
Go watch the Think Therefore I Am video. You did nail the look.
Yes. So here's an example of his thought, Descartes' like thought path. He's like an evil demon may be making me believe that things are false. There is nothing of which I can be certain. When I say I am, I exist. I cannot be wrong about this. An evil demon could try and make me believe this only if I really did exist. I am thinking, therefore I exist.
Oh.
So that's, yeah.
An evil demon can't trick you into thinking that you don't exist.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yes. Also a little graspy. Little graspy. Do you, what about Hobbes?
Oh, I got Hobbes.
The tiger.
I did a little research.
America's favorite comic.
Yep, Hobbes, the philosopher from Calvin and Hobbes. No, Thomas Hobbes, the political theorist. Yeah, so his context was this is during the English Civil War, so it's kind of like mid 1600s, and stuff is going crazy in England during the Civil War between the, I guess, Catholics and Protestants.
I see a quotation by him: "Life is but a motion of limbs."
And it's like Anglicans and Catholics.
There's like some very creepy. I see some very creepy like pictures of like veins and like tourniquets and stuff like that.
Oh, I didn't even research his medical stuff. I just
because he was all about like consciousness.
Oh, I read about his political theory, which is the book is The Leviathan, which has some pretty cool cover art.
Isn't that like some devil?
No, he just argues that he argues for social contract and rule by an absolute sovereign. So he was very he was a royalist. He was very pro-king. And so he believes humans are animals. The basic state of nature is the war of all against all. And he has the quote that life would be, nasty, brutish, and short if left to their own devices, which is clearly untrue because we've talked about all these hunter-gatherer societies that are relatively peaceful. But anyway, that's why he argues you need laws. You need a king who can do whatever they want. So that's kind of Hobbes. He did not have very much faith in his fellow man and thought that people had to be kept in line.
He also thought that he thought that humans were like robots basically. Men are machines. Yeah, because he was like the heart is just spring. The nerves are just wires. You would relate to him.
He was probably misunderstood, just like me.
Yeah.
So Hobbes gets contrasted, with John Locke a lot. So John Locke came a little bit later.
Not Calvin?
No.
Weird.
That's the funny thing. Yeah. I think Watterson just picked like cool names. But no, Calvin founded Calvinism and really was just
I was
a
joking.
theologian. He
just
wasn't
joking.
I don't know that he even qualifies as a philosopher.
Okay. So you want to talk about John Locke?
Yeah.
Is John Locke even in this? Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So John Locke he has very similar beliefs to Sir Francis Bacon, by the way. They're both English Enlightenment thinkers. So John Locke's considered the father of liberalism. So he believes in a lot of that kind of humans are innately good, have inalienable rights. This sounds a lot like the Declaration of Independence, which was pretty much they just copied John Locke when they wrote the Declaration of Independence.
Plagiarism.
So the concept of inalienable rights. So the sovereign shouldn't have absolute rule. Individual humans have rights that have to be respected. You can have a social contract or responsibilities, but it needs to start with individual freedoms that have to be respected by the sovereign. So he was very in favor of religious tolerance. Freedom of religion was a key thing that he liked, that the founders also picked up on. He did talk about epistemology somewhat, so that he believed knowledge derives from your sense of perception.
Oh, yeah, and he thought that your mind was just blank AF when you were born.
Yeah.
It's just a blank ass slate. And so he was like, if we corrupt the children, then we're going to have corrupt adults.
So this counters, going back to Plato and Aristotle and
the original
even Descartes,
sin dude.
He didn't believe that there's innate knowledge that exists out there in the universe that we should know. He believed, which I think most Americans at least kind of believe this now, that no, you learn things throughout your life. That's how you construct a theory of the world. That's how you gain knowledge and know stuff.
Yeah, that was his vibe. He was you can only know what you experience.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your John Locke. One funny thing is he really supported child labor.
Yes!
So
oh my God.
So totally for the Declaration of Independence.
These children will work for Shein. They will make cheap leotards.
Yeah, really.
And dollar makeup brushes.
I guess there's a reason child labor isn't really covered in the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, it's. I guess with a lot of these philosophers,
that's really funny because he was good education, but also
religious freedom, good education. Then he had some essay on the plight of the poor. And he's we should put their children to work. It's important. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, you take the good with the bad, folks. I guess different time. Yeah. So those are. I think we've covered your major Enlightenment
What about
thinkers.
Spinoza?
Oh yeah, we skipped
Jew.
over Spinoza. Yeah.
He was so cool because people threw rocks at him and he was like, "Fuck you, I'm God's child."
Yeah.
Really, I think people did throw rocks at him.
So Spinoza's great because, as you said, Jewish
He's
Enlightenment thinker.
Just like me.
And anti-Semitism was huge back then. So he's Dutch. The Dutch were more religiously tolerant than most other European countries. But, the Jews still lived in kind of their own, separate, part of the town or whatever, or neighborhood, and had their own culture that they kept, kind of like Hasidic Williamsburg or whatever. But they were in the Netherlands. But so he questioned the authenticity of the Bible. He was a very skeptical guy. So
as us Jews are wont to be.
Yeah, so he was like, wait, the Bible was written by, basically he was like every Sunday school brat. He was like, wait, the Bible was written by men though, right? By people. So maybe it's not all that accurate. How do we know the true word of God? And so he got shunned. So he was kicked out of the Jewish community at age 23. And then later the Catholic Church also banned his books. So the religious authorities did not like Spinoza very much. But yeah, he kind of followed in that, vein of sort of with Descartes or whatever, sort of self-discovery or how can we get a conception of the divine from reality. So he believed reality is perfection because why would God make reality any different?
Yeah, he's like God is in everything.
Yeah. So
And he said every object in the universe, even a rock, has a body and a mind.
All right.
Yeah. Which I like. No, he was like God is in nature. He's very like Kabbalah. He's like the original Madonna.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Sure.
He's Madonna. Okay. He's gorgeous.
Oh, so he by the
Beautiful
way,
hair.
he renounced renounced ethics beyond the material world.
Madonna, hello.
Much material. So he is compared to
Madonna.
the Epicureans. But like you said, not because he was like a hedonist, but because he believed that like personal happiness is what you should maximize, but through like living reasonably.
Yeah, he gave up a lot of like plush positions because he was like, I'm not gonna lie. He was like, I'm not gonna lie. I just want to study.
He turned down a lot of booty calls because he had work to do, and he's like, that's not where true happiness comes from.
Yeah. I'm married to philosophy.
Oh, and then he did. So this is neat because this is like what do we say? It's like early 1600s, but he influenced Freud a lot. So he had I don't know why he was writing about like psychology, but he held that knowledge of the true causes of passive emotions can transform it into an active emotion.
Yeah, because he was so bullied. I wasn't kidding. Like it was like a really transformative experience, like that he was like beaten when he was like by other children, and then he was like, I will survive.
Okay.
Yeah. He was like, die another day, bitch. Yeah. All right, so now we have the Age of Revolution, which is basically like all the Americans.
And some French.
All the Americans, like I said.
Okay.
Because like the French people were like friends, you know.
Okay.
French were like helping the Americans and whatnot during this time.
Oh, you're talking about the French and American Revolutions.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yes. Okay. So there's like the ones that I know that I'm like, okay, these names are familiar. I kind of know like the existentialists, like I know Kant, I know Kierkegaard, and Marx. Marx is not an existentialist, but we can also talk about Rousseau a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll probably want to talk about
So this
Rousseau.
is sort of a mix of what you'd call, there's a lot of political philosophers in here.
A lot of psychological.
American and French Revolution. And some amount of
psychological and like
stuff.
Existentialist.
And then Darwin is thrown in here, which I think is kind of unfair to call him a philosopher.
We're not even going to talk about that. Some of this is weird. We have a timeline, and some of it I disagree.
And then there's a lot of forms of government, because Marx and John Stuart Mill are in here.
So Rousseau has like the social contract, right? And he's like I just love this fact so much. He's like the man is born free, but everywhere he's in chains, right? Mm-hmm. Funny story. Rousseau is like a total sadist, and he loved being tied up and shit. Isn't that great?
Mm-hmm. Because he was free and chose to wear chains.
Yeah, he was like, that was like his fantasy. He's like, everywhere he's in chains, yes. But he basically was like, childlike joy is the best thing, and we shouldn't take it away from children. And like,
so he's probably against Locke.
As
far as the child labor question.
And he was into romanticism. A lot of people think his work is like borders on like romanticism, like works of writing and whatnot. Yes. He wrote the original 50 Shades of Grey.
Nice.
Yeah, romanticism.
We covered that in our fetishes episode. I
we
think
did.
Rousseau came up there.
Yeah,
is great.
He was like total.
He just kind of creeped in there a little bit.
Yeah, he's like, you want to tie me up? All right, so then we have Kant. I literally can't with this one. Kant. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. His critique of pure reason.
Yeah. So something that's like, he basically wanted to figure. Okay, so he wanted to figure out why people are like good and bad. And he was like, I kind of want to figure out like a philosophical way to explain all the stuff of like religion. So he was kind of like what Thomas Aquinas did. He like did that from the philosophy side, you know? Yeah, so he was like,
By the way, I think these philosophers, we weren't alive at the time. I think we missed out because there probably was like an album drop when like Kant was like, "Yo, my new shit's like, dropping.
My
single
is dropping.
Is called Critique of Pure Reason." Yeah, or like, right? Hobbes, like, you know, back in 1600s, he's like, "You got to check out this new shit. It's called Leviathan. My new album has come out. It's Leviathan.
So
my new treatise."
My new treatise.
My new treatise is coming out.
I treatise my fans well. Yeah. So he came up with the categorical imperative, which is basically like the secular version of do unto others as you would do unto yourself.
Oh.
Yeah. That was so he had like two separate like areas. One was like, yeah, religious people are like so happy, but I'm not really religious. So like, how do I make all my very upset like philosopher dudes?
How do I impress
happy?
My mother-in-law?
Yeah,
she's very religious.
So he said that, yeah, like treating other people how you would want to be treated. Like that's one of the things. Another thing is
the gold rule, bitch.
Yeah. Another thing is the beauty of nature. So he was having like a Cinderella moment when like, you know, he was like, oh my gosh, like if you're feeling super evil and dark, like you just need to open up your window and look at all the beauty.
Take a little walk.
And that's common among everyone. Like that can make you feel good. He also talked a bit about like these two worlds, like the world inside our head and the outside world, and like he took a little mushroom. Like sometimes he was like, the beauty of nature, let me eat this mushroom, because then he was like, let's get transcendental. And a lot of when you do transcendental like meditation and you like focus on consciousness and like what is consciousness, it like was giving me these vibes a lot of like where he's like, time can only be experienced by something that's like physically moving. So like we can never experience time firsthand. We can only experience it while like holding a clock. You know, like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's some bullshit.
Yeah,
all right,
some shroomy mixed shroomers then
I'm
over
done
here.
I can't.
You can't. Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard is like my boy. I love him so much. He's great.
Kierkegaard?
Soren. He was Soren, just like me, because I'm an Arielist.
It's really fun to try to pronounce their names.
His O has like a slash through it. Like
Soren,
whatever language it's from was like, fuck you, O. And then let me cross you out.
German? Probably German.
Yeah, probably German. Yeah. So he's the father of existentialism. He had awesome hair. He had hair like yours, the wave. Look at it. Look at that hair. Look at that beautiful hair. He had like Mozart hair. Yeah.
Yeah. The father of existentialism.
So this is why I love him so much. He took laughing so seriously. He was like, you are fucked all the ways, any which way. You know, if you are rich, you're going to be miserable at your job. If you get married, you're not going to be sexy. If you are sexy your whole life, you're going to die alone. You know, like New York is full of comedians, but no one is funny. Like he was that dude, right? So he was like, the only rational choice is just to laugh at the darkness of our reality. And then he also hated choices, which I fucking hate making decisions. So, yeah.
Okay. I feel you're
what?
You're oversimplifying.
That's what I
He didn't hate choices.
He said that choices give you anxiety as they give me.
But he didn't mean it in a bad way. He said anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, and he sympathized with people feeling that way. But kind of the key thing that underlies existentialism is right. And so we talked about Aristotle and this theory of forms and everything. Essentialism, things have essential properties. before they come into existence. Existentialism is the opposite. It's like, no, there's a insanely large, massive, uncaring universe out there that exists. The existence comes first, and you give it the essence. It's your brain. You're the one who assigns meaning to
You
everything that you
decide.
see, and everything you take for granted in life is really just through ingrained hobbies. The fact that we are sitting on two stools talking into weird little metal things, microphones or whatever, right? Looking at like a little screen that people can see is like such a weird, alien, absurd concept. And like he saw absurdity in everything. It's so like how bizarre everything is if you don't have that training as a human to
That's
like be in
more-
society. But the point that he makes is because everything is absurd, it's on you. It's your obligation to create your own meaning. And that's what he meant by like there is then freedom in that. Once you realize that
I feel like that's more Camus and the myth of Sisyphus. Kierkegaard, I think you're talking more Camus.
Camus more popularized ideas of Sartre.
Yeah, but Camus was like I feel like he's the one who's more like what you're saying. I feel like Kierkegaard, because Kierkegaard was like, he was like the leap of faith dude. Like he was just like, fuck it. Like the one thing that he liked about religion was that people just go blindly into it. And so he was kind of like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You got to laugh at how like ridiculous that is, and then you just got to go blindly into it.
But I think he was making the point that religion is a choice and a way to provide meaning to stuff. But as long as you acknowledge it's just as arbitrary as any other way of like providing meaning to like your life or to reality. So with his anxieties, the dizziness of freedom is that once you realize you have that freedom, it is very unsettling for lots of people, and so that's why people will choose religion or.
Oh yeah, right.
And I think,
and he was like, they'll choose stupidity, basically.
Yeah, and he wasn't dismissive or mean about it. I think Sartre more was like in like Sartre's plays and writing, he seems to be sort of have some contempt for people for doing that. And I know existentialists are characterized or like caricatured as like being obnoxious grad students who are like, no one understands. It's all meaningless.
The
what they're
Byronic
doing.
yeah, the Byronic hero.
Heroes are basically
Which Camus, on the nose, Camus is totally all of his protagonists are like a Byronic hero, especially like the prisoner one.
The stranger.
The stranger.
Yeah.
The stranger.
The
you ever given yourself a stranger?
But anyway, so I think that's what that Kierkegaard quote means, is that he's not being judgmental either, being like these sheep are like asleep or whatever. He's just like, it is terrifying to realize that you have that level of freedom to do whatever you want. You could stop your day-to-day activities or what you assume is your normal life at any point
and murder someone.
It's all absurd.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So Camus says you could murder someone.
Yeah.
But that concept shows up in both Kierkegaard and Sartre, like very into it and wrote about it a lot. The concept of suddenly realizing that everything is absurd and it like doesn't make any sense to you or have to make sense. Sartre. I can't. It's really difficult to pronounce the French. Yeah, so we'll say Sartre. But anyway, I think that's what Kierkegaard was getting at, and then it was further refined by Sartre, and then Camus. I think really then by writing novels and plays sort of popularized these concepts.
Yeah, I love Camus.
We'll talk about him next, maybe.
Should we talk
later.
about?
Yeah, because Camus recent. Camus like post World War II.
So Marx, I think, is the last one in the Revolution, and then we'll go into the modern world, and there's only 4 in that one.
All right.
Okay. So Marx he was like the Communist Manifesto. He's yeah, the Communist Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
He was, but you know, it was cool because he was like, people get really sad when they like lose connection with like their furniture and whatnot. So like he was like, I'm sitting in a chair right now, but like who made this chair? I wish to know the person who made it. And he was like, I can't because I got it from Amazon. So why don't I live on a commune and like we all can make each other chairs and stuff like that and like care for each other.
Yeah, again, kind of a jump there, but Marx really analyzed like what capitalism does. And so he talks about the fetishization of commodities.
He was like, it's just the Grace Jones song.
Not fetishization as from our, right, as we explained in our fetishes episode. It just means turning like
an object more important than a real person.
Yeah, or turning a living thing into an object.
Yeah.
Even, or a thing with meaning into an object. So a commodity like these nice IKEA stools that we're sitting on, which are made out of plastic, which comes from oil and metal that was mined somewhere, and they were all assembled by, I hope they were treated well, laborers in some far-off country and then shipped to America where they were assembled. Treating that is just an object. So he kind of breaks down that capitalism is incredibly good at hiding sort of like the source of the stuff that you consume and where it comes from, and minimizing the role of like the labor that builds the thing.
Yeah, and he had like concepts of a utopia, which is like the communist utopia.
So depending who, I mean, right, many people argue that Marx they thought was a great historian, but actually like pretty terrible philosopher, depending who you read, and that he wrote actually a pretty good summary sort of like Russia up to the point, like when he was writing it. But also that like Marx is, I mean, communism is going to get a bad rap because it's probably like the major source of death throughout like the 20th century, between like China and Russia and the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, he was like, there's always a ruling class, like the proletariat, or there's the bourgeois and like the proletarians, and like that's what's the cause of conflict. So if we just destroy class, then there won't be like conflict.
Sort of, but what he said is he wasn't even advocating that we should like there should be a revolution. So Marx gets, unfortunately, like Lenin and Stalin then acted out very brutally to like bring about Marxism, but Marx actually thought capitalism would go away on its own.
They were like, we're all going to make chairs and sit in them. God damn it.
So, yeah, Marx argued that like over time the power of labor. He was wrong, by the way, but like labor would gain more and more power, and exploitation would have to end. Just as like technology advanced and there was more and more surplus, and everybody got richer, eventually like the proletariat would become on the same level as the bourgeois, and capitalism would have to end, and you'd get like a pretty even social, like
and
flat
you'd have
social
to
structure.
Use Marx dollars and go to Burning Man.
And instead.
Instead, Shenzhen, China happened.
Yeah, I mean, kind of Lenin then,
Yeah.
seized power, and then Stalin was incredibly brutal about running the Soviet Union. And so, yeah, got a bad rap. And then I don't think Mao really did any favors for it either. So, yeah, communism didn't really work in practice. But,
oops. Well, Burning Man. Oh, wait. Never mind.
And then it seems like Marx was pretty much wrong,
Burning Man is like a modern...
It's not really an example of anything.
Isn't it like a modern example of how...
Refuse to even acknowledge it as a social structure.
They wanted it to be like a communist like paradise, but now it's like capitalism like ruined it, you know?
Right? To the credit of the organizers of Burning Man, they're trying to stop that. They've done a good job of pushing back on the like camps you can pay for.
No one's being helicopter dropped anymore.
They don't allow it. And this year they had a renegade burn because Burning Man themselves didn't do an official Burning Man.
Oh my goodness.
We'll have to edit this out. This probably isn't relevant to the podcast
Sorry,
about
I'm
philosophy.
sorry.
I'm glad we talked about it.
I enjoyed it. Okay, so Nietzsche.
Yeah.
So Nietzsche. The modern world.
Yeah, he's got some pretty niche philosophies.
Yeah. Do you know about Nietzsche? He's the one who's like God is dead.
Oh, that's right. What a provocative statement. He's like, you got to check out my new album. My new single is
God is dead.
God is dead. Yeah, what's the context of that? What does that mean?
Well, here's his thought process, okay? He said, Christianity says that everything in this world is less important than that of the next world after death. It says we should turn away from what seems important and try and in life and try and transcend it.
Mm-hmm.
But in doing this, we turn away from life itself. Christianity's idea of man undermines what we are capable of. We must surpass this limiting idea. And then and besides, God is dead. So he's basically saying that man will surpass itself. Like the greatest things you can do are like in your own life. And
he had this concept of like the Superman, right? The like Ubermensch.
Yeah.
Which then led to Nazism.
Yep. Which is like, yikes. Yeah, and there's like what is it? He spoke
Thus
spoke Zarathustra. Oh, I can never say it.
Zarathustra.
Yeah, I can't say it.
I never read it. Was it a good novel?
Yeah, it's just about like the prophet named
Okay.
Zara, where we love to get our
Zara.
clothes.
Yeah, Zara
Right.
fast fashion.
Yeah,
Okay.
they founded a religion, but based on the struggle between good and evil, and
Sounds like every religion.
yeah, and so Nietzsche's
Okay.
saying like man is beyond that, like man is over that. It's like
Okay.
yeah, which is like he's like we are above and beyond that.
Okay. But then, yeah, unfortunately then led to Nazism and Hitler's belief in like a master race. So, yeah, also, bummer for Nietzsche and Marx.
Yeah, 'cause he
History is not kind with their ideas.
Yeah, he didn't.
Be careful when you philosophize out there, those of you listening to this podcast, because a genocidal dictator might just pick up your ideas and use them.
Yeah, he his writings like in his time people were like meh, but then after his death, yeah, that's when, isn't that ironic? Because he was like,
Oh, God is dead, but then he's dead.
well, but he was also like, he was really fed up with like, oh, Christians doing all this being good and like, not doing their full potential because they want to reach the afterlife. So you should like do all your greatest stuff in life. But he made his greatest impact after his death.
Nice.
Haha. So he proved himself wrong.
Okay. And then who else? Is Freud in here? We're going to do
Yes.
Freud, or is he more of a psychologist?
No, Freud is in there, as Freud's in there.
Okay. So influenced by Spinoza.
Yes. And he was trying to get to the bottom of his daddy issues, basically. Yeah, and no, he was trying to get to the underlying traumas that drive the actions that we do in the present. Like he believed that there's like so much stuff that's like suppressed. He was like a Scientologist kind of.
Oh, can I?
Yeah, go for it.
This is the Nietzsche quote as said by Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park.
Go for it.
Because he goes, God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man kills God. Man brings back dinosaurs.
Yes, that's it. I love that.
Okay.
That's what Nietzsche, that's his legacy.
Great writing, Spielberg. Fantastic.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, so Freud basically believed that there were a lot of like underlying traumas and you have to bring them up through therapy. And once you talk about them, then you can go on with your life, which really is, I said, who's like the original Scientologist, and it's
Do we have a
kind of
recorded
true.
episode where we talk about like Freud's like developmental stages? And there are like 5 developmental stages.
yeah. We don't have one. We'll have to do one on psychology.
Okay, we'll do another
Yeah.
one.
But it has, it's like you have so many opportunities to fuck up as a parent. Like if you breastfeed your kid for too long, they're gonna always want to be putting shit in their mouth.
He's reaching. Yeah, he reaches a lot. He's like,
if
if you don't potty train them, they're
Yeah,
gonna be obsessed with shitting.
Yep.
And
But all his stuff, I always want to
also
be
at
like.
some point they'll see their own penis and then try to kill you.
Well, his thing was also like all the like weird stuff that people do. It's boys do the weird stuff because they're constantly afraid that someone will castrate them, and so they have this anxiety.
Yeah.
And so all the like
and they
stuff
all
is
want
to
to
cope
sleep
with
with
that.
their mothers. Right? Didn't he coin
The
Oedipal
Oedipal complex.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more than that though. It was like it was also still is kind of absurd. But
It's
it was
wild. Everyone was like, "This is the smartest man of our century. This is the Charles Darwin of our century.
Yeah, he was
This is
doing
the
so
Isaac
much
Newton of our
coke,
century."
so much
And he was
cocaine,
just doing a shitload of coke, and
smoking
writing,
cigars.
just
He was
smoking
like
cigars, writing shit down.
smoking the cigar, and he was like, yeah, oral fixations,
Yeah.
phallic,
Just
like
imagine. He probably
penis
just
envy.
slept through all his patient sessions so he could go out and do more cocaine.
Well, that was
afterwards.
also a
Yeah.
thing. That was a phase, and there is a
Phase,
German word
yeah.
for like when you fall asleep in Freudian psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
We'll do a therapy episode, and then the last person we can talk about is the only woman in the whole.
We didn't really cover Camus though.
Oh crap! Oh yeah, Camus was great. He was really hot.
I mean, we kind of did
And,
Sartre in combination with Kierkegaard, but we should dig a little bit into
Camus,
Sartre.
he was so hot,
Camus.
and he died really sexy, like a sexy French, smart, hot man.
Well, we also should get it. So Sartre was using mescaline, which is peyote.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, like all these like 1900s philosophers and writers were like used a ton of drugs.
They were Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Pretty much. So Sartre, his number one hit, Nausea. And
That was at the beginning of his trip.
a lot of this, I think it really was just inspired by like the mescaline he was on. Because I've had this experience while on acid before, that he talks in Nausea about the main character at some point, like looks at a chair and just forgets what a chair is for and can't conceive of like what this wooden structure is.
You know what? That has happened to me when before I was medicated for my ADHD. I had an existential crisis where I was in my apartment. I was not on any drugs, and I was like, "What is all of this? Like, I don't even know. Like, who can I trust?" Yeah.
Yeah, and he the concept of semantic satiation when you say a word so many times in a row. Yeah, when you're like podcast,
Yeah.
again and again.
It feels
and
like
your brain forgets the meaning of it, and you just hear the sound, and you're like, "What a strange word."
it feels like someone like walks on your grate. You're just like, "Huh." I had that the first time that ever happened to me.
Someone feels like someone walks on your grave.
Yeah, the first time because I've had a lot of mini existential like moments. I wouldn't call them crises, but like I remember I was in like kindergarten, and it was like playtime, and they had a mirror, and I like was looking in the mirror, and I was like, who is looking back at me? Like I was like, what is that? Is that a person? Like I had to walk away.
So yeah, so he said this following in Kierkegaard, but I guess fleshing out the ideas more, a lot of like what Sartre sort of argues is if like everything really is that alien, you've just been conditioned to give it a certain meaning. That could be all of reality. It just has the meaning that you ascribe to it because of the culture and society that you're in. But it doesn't have to. It's arbitrary. So the existence of the thing, the matter that's there, the fact that you are like, when you do something at 8 o'clock, it's because the giant rock that you're on that orbits the sun has tilted in such a way
We're on a
that
rock.
you consider it, well, planet. We talked about what it's made of last
No,
episode.
I was like, oh no.
We talked about the feldspar. Yeah, that's like when you do a certain activity and how sort of arbitrary and meaningless that is to have a schedule, the concept of it. So if you create your own meaning, that is absolute freedom, which can cause anxiety. So it's up to you to create your own meaning. And then Camus, so Sartre posed this sort of dilemma or like way of thinking about the world, and I think didn't have an answer other than sort of just misery, because the stuff he writes, like his play No Exit, is 3 characters who just cause each other misery. And one of Sartre's famous quotes is, "Other people are hell," which is what the play No Exit is about, and that like a lot of misery comes from the expectations or meanings that other people have created that trap you. because you
Yeah.
accept them, and he makes the point that you've accepted them. You don't have to. You
Yeah.
could leave your job or whatever tomorrow.
It's like all anxiety is caused by like your perception of like what someone else is gonna think. Like
Yeah.
if it's just about you, it's like there's no anxiety.
Yes, as RuPaul famously says.
How the hell are you gonna love yourself?
I thought it was
It's none of your business what other people think of you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and which is RuPaul might not know of, but it's a very existentialist phrase.
Yeah.
So then, Sartre, I think, good at explaining and really digging into these ideas with the assistance of drugs. But Camus, who is a handsome rock star and war hero, popularized these concepts and like was a great writer and wrote about them most eloquently. So we should end with Camus because he's probably
What? But no Simone de Beauvoir.
okay.
No
we'll
women?
do it. Sorry.
You are.
All right.
You
Let me
are
just talk about
proving what
Camus
she
and then we'll add
says.
those. So Camus, French writer, joined the French Resistance during World War II. He was
Okay, but like his books.
very left. He was a pacifist. This feeds into his books. He won the Nobel Prize for his writing,
What were his books about?
and so he wrote 3 cycles for his
Okay.
books, right? And so the first cycle that everyone I think knows includes The Stranger, and The Myth of Sisyphus was an essay, and then he wrote a play in that series as well. So he, in The Myth of Sisyphus, he very much compares sort of the human struggle in modern life to Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill.
And the boulder falls down. He has to do it all over again.
Yeah.
Just like when you do laundry and then you take the clothes off
You
and you
go
put them
wear
in
'em.
the laundry bin and the cycle starts over again.
Yeah, that if existence is this sort of meaningless endeavor of just doing work, then what is the point of it all? And I thought Camus had really the best answer, and where Sartre, I think, didn't necessarily answer the question, he just posed it, as philosophers love to do. Camus said, "Does the realization of the absurd require suicide?"
Oh, right, because he's like, you do have a choice. You couldn't kill yourself.
And he said, well, Camus was great. He said, no, it requires revolt.
Yeah.
So Camus very much made the argument that, like, no, you have to create your own meaning. It's an obligation. It's on
Yeah.
you to decide what you're going to do with your life. And it can be terrifying to have that
And
freedom,
then
but that's what you should do.
he decided.
So he makes the argument that, right, we must imagine Sisyphus happy because he had work and a purpose. Even his own life had its meaning, pushing this rock up and down the hill.
And he was like, he could push it up and down different ways. He could like push it up with his butt one day and, you know.
So he ends that essay with, we must imagine Sisyphus happy.
Yeah. So then Camus made the choice to cancel a plane ticket and to take a ride with his publisher.
Yeah. Hey, artist Timor. So yes, Camus famously died in a car crash, just like James Dean.
Yeah.
And yeah, he went out in a blaze of glory.
But it was like a last minute decision too. It was like his publisher was like, hey, instead of like going to wherever you were going to go, why don't you take a little drive with me?
I mean, I don't know how safe were planes in 1960, so who knows?
Yeah. So, all right. So we'll end with Simone de Beauvoir. De Boudoir, the sexy philosopher.
No, we didn't talk about Hipparchia.
Oh yeah, there was
Hipparchia.
one woman in the beginning, and now there's one woman at the end.
Let's do the ladies' corner. We'll end with the ladies' corner.
The ladies.
So Simone de Beauvoir is probably the best. Hipparchia we can go over quickly, right? She just kind of lived in poverty and had sex in public. She was a cynic in ancient Greece. Philosophers,
awesome.
man. That's a crazy bunch. Yeah. And then Ayn Rand was not a philosopher, so I don't think we should discuss her in this
and
episode.
we hate her.
She's just a fucking third-rate writer who inspired a bunch of third-rate dumbasses. So we're not going to get into that.
Yeah.
All right, tell us about Simone.
So Simone was
Hey, Michael.
basically like man. She was like, man is like the one. Like man is human, and like women are other. Woman is other. Because if you think about it, all the language that we have about like men, or no, about humans, is like assuming that we're talking about a man, and then they're like, here's a special little cute pink category for women, and this like fucks up little girls, and they grow up into fucked up women.
Yeah.
And she's like, I don't know what to do about it. I'm just like pointing it out to you all.
This is kind of the foundation of feminist thought,
yeah.
I suppose.
So here, yeah, like in 10 Things I Hate About You, Julia Stiles is like, haven't you ever? What about, you know, like, because she's like talking about. She's like, what about the feminine mystique, and what about Beauvoir? Yeah. So a good example of this would be like what we're doing right now, and we're like all the philosophers and then the women philosophers. That's actually exactly what she was talking about. Another example is like
Black History Month.
Yes, or well, I mean, I was gonna say like sports, like, because they'll be like the greatest athletes of all time, and then like they're all men, and then they're like the greatest women athletes of all time. Like they're not even in. They're like there's no women in that list. They have to have their second category just for them, and it's assumed that category is going to be like already like the best one of those is going to be worse than the worst one of the men.
Like scientist mom wins the Nobel Prize.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, and she's saying like also is like when we give girls like dolls and stuff like that to play with, and we teach them like good qualities or like this was in like the 19
Yeah, she was the first wave feminist, right?
through 50. Yeah, so
kind of founder of the feminist movement.
Yeah, so now we're kind of like duh, but I will leave everyone with this question. My question is that I wonder what she would think of being non-binary, because I believe she would think of like being non-binary. She would be like, that's an interesting solution, because you're saying I don't want to deal with like any of this language nonsense. It's kind of like Camus like is suicide. It's like
being
the
non-binary or choosing even a pronoun that's non-gender specific, like they.
You're not going to be an oppressor or an oppressist. Oppressed?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's what she would say.
And you think she would think she'd be like, oh, cool solution.
Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate the approach. Post-gender.
Yeah, because she really was like, I don't know what to do about this.
Yeah, I think it's... I don't know if I have a question, but it was a thing that kind of came up multiple times in this episode, right? That we talked about, like John Locke and his like belief in religious freedom, and how it led into like the American Revolution and their principles of like a democracy and inalienable rights. And he was like, but child labor, yes, very important. The young should be working. And that like occasionally they just hold these totally seemingly out of sync ideals based on either the time they were in or just who they were. They couldn't even conceive of something different. So I'm sure John Locke, if you were like, yeah, gay marriage, like legal, he'd be like, he would lose his mind. Like that probably was something he never conceived of and he wouldn't get, because he was probably like, no, within a Christian framework. Yeah. So like,
or he'd like take off his whatever, like his pantaloons, and he'd just have like a rainbow flag like thong on, and he'd be like, I have been waiting for this. I don't
think he'd be into it.
He'd be like, children made this thong though.
Yeah. But all of which is to say that I think, as we've seen, throughout, the philosophers are all very much products of their own time and their cultural context. And also they're always inside a different box, like throughout history. Hopefully, like the box is like getting larger as we like move into the future. In which
Speak
like
for yourself,
philosophical small box club. Yeah, but they're starting from a very small set of, I don't know, allowed ideas or principles, right? That like Socrates was killed for like disrespecting the gods, or like, and it just goes on from there. So hopefully, getting to the point where, I mean, maybe the existentialists nailed it. I don't know. That in being like, no, there is no box. It's just you conceived it yourself.
All right. So let's do I like that. So let's do our plugs, and then we'll end with our own philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you so much for joining us. If you like this, we have a bunch of other podcast episodes on Question Block in wherever you get your podcasts. If you really like us, if you love us, leave us a 5-star review. If you say something cute, we'll shout you out. If you have stuff you want us to cover for the future,
don't put it in the review.
Yeah.
You can just ping us. You know,
Yeah.
the Instagram or the Twitch.
You can stalk us. You know our address. Come to Secret Loft for a party or comedy show.
Yeah, you can see us in person. So this Friday we got 2 shows at Secret Loft at 8 and 10, and
well, this is gonna come out after.
Oh yeah.
So just look on our website and come to whatever's coming up. There's Ariel at
there
all
will
the
still
parties.
Be an upcoming Friday show and a party.
There's
so check 'em out.
Halloween. This is gonna come out definitely before then. So come to Halloween. Come to comedy. Tell us, give us a hug.
Yeah,
we're
back. To our friends who checked in.
Yeah, thank
on,
you so much.
On Twitch, shout out Chef Maki, loyal listener, and everybody who checked in on Instagram too, including artist Emor and Michael Farrar.
And Ian. Yeah, and I saw Dave in there.
Yep.
And so what's your philosophy?
Oh man, I don't have a unique one. I just thought I'm just copying Camus. I thought he was really cool. So
I
just,
like that. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, or the Anthony Bourdain, like
Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, the Anthony Bourdain, like Epicureanism mixed with existentialism. You have to provide your own life meaning. So make it sustainably fun, I suppose, is maybe the way to do it. So eat slow, drinking Negroni, maybe 2, but hang out with your friends. There's
and have
a cute GF.
A cute GF.
I used to did you have a quote on your AOL Instant Messenger or on your early Facebook? You got to put a quote for yourself?
I mean, mine used to be defying gravity, so.
Okay. So mine was a quote from, there's this...
Also, flyer than altitude cruise.
What?
Flyer than altitude cruise.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm more fly than, a plane that's flying an altitude cruise.
What's altitude cruise?
That's where planes fly.
I didn't know that was even a term.
Yeah.
All right, well...
I'm young.
I personally... I used to have this quote from the British ska band, The Specials, and it's "Enjoy yourself. It's later than you think."
Oh, that's cute.
Which I think is
you live your life like that.
I think kind of sums it up pretty well. It's a very existentialist / Epicurean quote.
Yeah. I like that. Oh, that's really cute. I would say
I see a Helen in the Twitch.
Oh, hey. Cruise, yeah. She gets that cruising altitude. Yeah. I would say everything is your moment. So live your moment, live your best life.
You better lose yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm always am I going to look back on this as a good memory or not? Not because I want to look back on stuff,
sort of
but
the Fight Club. This is your life.
This is exactly. The Tyler Durden.
You're dying 1 second at a time.
Yeah, and we're gonna play ourselves out.
I gotta do that at parties. I'll play myself out.
I'll play myself out.
Play my own exit music
with the ultimate philosopher, Billie Eilish. Oh, we'll be back next week too.
We'll be back. We'll see you next Wednesday at 8.
All right, you post for the.
I'm not your friend.